Good evening, everyone. 46, that's how many people have been killed at the hands of another person in Kern County so far this year. That's according to local law enforcement.
23 ABC's Brianna Willis joins us now with an in-depth breakdown on the number of homicides and other crimes, plus how that compares to 2021 when Kern County saw its highest homicide rate on record. Brianna.
Mark Keeley, those 46 killings occurred between January and June this year in all of Kern County. But during the same time last year, there were 70, according to our 23 ABC homicide tracker. And while that number has decreased, the Bakersfield Police Department and the Kern County Sheriff's Office say one death is still too many.
2021 was a particularly violent year, not just for Bakersfield, but for the country. Unfortunately, we're seeing those numbers decrease in 2022.
Homicide is described as the deliberate killing of one person by another. Under the Bakersfield Police Department jurisdiction, there were 19 homicides from January to June of this year, compared to 31 during the same time period in 2021. Under the Sheriff's Office jurisdiction, there were 27 this year, the same number of killings by this time last year. KCSO says this means there hasn't been much change for their department.
Last year's total count was 52 homicides. So they're kind of on track. It's very similar numbers. It really hasn't increased or decreased at this point.
When it comes to 2021, BPD says it saw every type of homicide.
We saw pretty much every metric, right? If it was just homicides pertaining to gang activity, then you could point your finger and say it was gang related, but it wasn't. It was domestic violence homicides, homicides with drug nexuses. So it was uniformly high.
But while homicides have decreased so far this year, robberies have not. During the first half of 2022, 328 robberies have been reported to BPD so far. Compared to last year, there were 294. For KCSO, there have been 251 reports of robberies from January through June this year, compared to 222 a year ago.
Unfortunately, robbery is still right around where 2021 was, which is above 2020. We saw a decrease, and that could be directly related to COVID business closures and less targets of opportunity, of course, during that time.
But regardless of the crime, BPD says it's still necessary to let law enforcement know.
When we get these numbers, we look at locations where we see frequency of these types of incidents. And that's a lot of times how we allocate staffing, how we allocate extra patrol.
When it comes to combating additional crime, KCSO says the 1-cent sales tax measure on the ballot this November would help.
It would 100% tremendously help us bring back things like our gang unit and other specialized units that we've had to dissolve because we just didn't have the funding to attract new personnel or the funding to pay for these additional positions.
And despite the type of crime, BPD says it's still working to keep everyone safe.
It's nice to see those numbers come down. We're still going to be proactive in our enforcement and still exhaust every resource in investigating these crimes that affect people.
And another crime that has increased this year is catalytic converter theft. KCSO has seen 345 so far in the first half of this year compared to 337 so far last year during the first half of the year. Now coming up at 6, we'll have more stats on violent crime here in Kern County. In studio, Brianna Willis, 23 ABC News, connecting you.